Basically, I just wanted to present results that we had from an European project that was focusing on science communication in general, and especially on quality and effectiveness in science communication. And in this project, I led the team in Venice working on social media. So I will share today insights and recommendations that we produced in the project. But before going there, I would like to start giving a bit of the context, so where we started, because of course we are focusing here on social media, and so to understand how we can also better communicate on social media, it's really necessary to understand how in general the information space online works, and what are the characteristics of this information space, so that we can also, let's say, try adapting our communication strategy to this new and evolving environment. So we know that, of course, communication changed a lot with the advent of the internet and social media, that information can spread very easily. And so this is, of course, valid for any kind of information. So good information, less reliable information, unverified information, and so on. And what also we know that this, we have lots of information that is there, and in some sense it can also be overwhelming for the users, because of course we have to deal with a lot of information. And what we have observed is that looking at the data, and so through empirical analysis, is that users online tend to focus on information that is coherent with their worldviews, with their system of beliefs. And this, of course, has also some implications on what we do on the communication side. And what we have observed is, for example, in different settings, I would say also in different countries, and for different topics in different platforms, we have observed the emergence of this now so famous called echo chambers. So the fact that we can observe the presence of these groups of like-minded individuals who share, let's say, common narrative, a common worldview, and keep reinforcing this narrative inside these groups. What's also interesting is that what we also observe is that users, so we already said that they confine their attention to this, let's say, more limited set of news sources, but what we also observe is that this set is smaller for increasing levels of activity and longevity of the users on the platform. So this also means that not only they confine their attention, to a limited set of news sources, but that this set of news sources keeps going on and reducing. And so this can be an issue, or at least something that we have to take into account where we are considering, for example, information, also pluralism, which can be important for our societies. What we have also observed is that the fact of having this very polarized structure and segregated also structure is also something that we can relate to how the users interact in terms of their emotions and sentiment. And what we have observed is that usually this kind of exchanges between different and let's say opposite groups are not happening very often. So this is the first very important observation. And when it happens, these kind of discussions are not, let's say, civil discussions that are happening between, groups having different positions or on a particular topic, but it's a discussion that is often degenerating towards negative values. So this is something that we already observed some years ago, and very recently we observed this when we were analyzing hate speech on social media, and we found that there was a very strong relationship between polarization and hate speech in our data. And also that we do not find, for example, any link between hate speech and misinformation. But what we find is that there is no, category of users that is the only one using aggressive, violent, or inappropriate speech. But what we find is that we have, let's say, common users who in some cases are triggered to use this kind of language. And the toxicity of the discussion is also positively correlated with the length of the discussion. And what we have also observed is that mainly this kind of inappropriate language that sometimes can also be violent is mainly used when the users are interacting with their opponents, so in the other community. So all these characteristics are also important in terms of, for example, if we think also of communication as a kind of mean that we have to contrast misinformation, because of course what we put into action has to be, we would like to have this to be effective. But what we have seen so far is that the main drawbacks of this very polarized segregated structure is that since the users are only interacting with content that is more or less coherent with their own narrative, it's very difficult that they interact with content that is, for example, correcting some beliefs. So, for example, of the content like fact-checking or debunking. So what we have observed, we have also observed that in some cases, we measured some sort of backfire effect of these corrections. But I do think that the main interesting and important result here is that this kind of content was not really, even able to reach the target because of the structure that we have. And on the other side, the drawbacks of debunking and these kind of approaches are also the fact that they require lots of resources, also in terms of time that we usually do not have because of how also the online structure works. And so once a piece of information is spreading, it's very difficult if we do not stop it very quickly. And so what we can, and also, in this then pandemic, we were talking a lot about the infodemic, mainly referring to the fact that we have lots of information that is going around. This information is sometimes not coherent. And so this, of course, can destabilize. It's not very easy for the users to, understand what's going on, to make a clear idea of what's going on. And this can be, of course, it can also generate chaos in the population. And in the case of the pandemic, it can reduce, for example, vaccines uptakes or also following the restrictions that we had to go. So of course we are especially, and I think the pandemic highlighted this a lot, especially when we are in a situation of high scientific uncertainty. We are in front of this strong communication challenge. So how we can address the needs of the citizens, and in this specific case today of the users online, trying to provide the best information possible. And so the question is what we can do. Okay, so I gave you now this overview, not very optimistic overview so far, but so the question can be, so what we can do. Okay, and we did a bit in this direction, so to try to understand how we can contrast misinformation, not from more a direct approach, so direct contrast, but more generally by improving the information system, and so by improving also the quality of the information that we can release to the general public. We have done an experiment, for example, together with some journalists from the main newspaper that we had in Italy, where we measured the response of the users, not the content itself, but to how the content was presented to the readers, and we found some interesting insights there. And this is also explaining on, highlighting, I would say, on one side, that sometimes it's not only what you are communicating, but also the form and how you are presenting this on social media platforms and to the users. So going back to science communication, we worked in this project to try to improve the quality and effectiveness of communication. And how we did this? In the first phase of the project, we carried out a quantitative analysis on a very huge data set of science communication accounts. We listed these accounts for 3 platforms: Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, which are the main platforms in Europe. Of course, all these results are focused on Europe because this is a European project. I do hope that the insights can also be useful for people across the world. But I think that some of the results can be, in some sense, generalized, just to get the idea also how complex and fragmented the field is. For example, in building the data set, we decided to consider different kinds of science communication actors. So, for example, not only journalists but more in generally communication practitioners, but also universities, institutions, also some industries and organizations or festivals, magazines. So because the field is there is lots of variety. And we did this for 7 countries, the countries of the project plus Germany. And we did this on general, but also for 3 specific controversial issues: vaccines, artificial intelligence, and climate change. We chose vaccine before the pandemic because it was already a topic that is, we know that this can be controversial for people. And in the end, it also proved a very good choice. So the results. So all the results of this analysis, I do not have time to go into this now. But if you are interested, you can access the report on the Quest website. Here you can find also the QR code if you want. And you have all this information in the slides. So after this phase where we analyzed the data, we also wanted to define, quality in the project, and we did this with organizing workshops across Europe, where we decided to co-design these indicators, quality indicators, together with the different actors that are involved in science communication. This was a very interesting exercise, I would say, also because the definition of quality can be challenging because we can use this word very, easily, but in the end, when you have, you are there and you have to define it, you understand that we have also different perspectives to take into account, and the perspective of the journalist is not the same as the researcher or as the member from the general public. These quality indicators were produced in general for science communication, but then we also, let's say, translated these indicators for social media. We used the combination of the insights from the quantitative analysis and the indicators to produce these recommendations for communicating science on social media. What we also did was that so the first draft of the recommendations that indeed we called tips, or we use sometimes, kind of the name principles, because this was kind of, we didn't want to design guidelines for these people, but we wanted, just to give them some also food for thought. So let's, remember that these aspects are important. And we shared this with the group of communication practitioners, and they tested our recommendations on their social media accounts for a period of 5 months. So in this period, we also refined recommendations, and in the end, we were, and it was particularly useful because, of course, we had the direct feedback of people using, communicating science in their daily activity. And also on the other side, we believe that this was also a very good approach to maximize chances of adoption of the recommendations in the community. So the recommendations were basically were based on the principles of quality that we defined in indicators that are can be grouped in these 3 main pillars: the trustworthiness and scientific rigor, the presentation and style, and the impact on society of the communication. So you can see that some of them are more, let's say, obvious than others. So of course, when we think about quality in science communication, fact checking the content, or having references or links are something that we always usually think of, but other aspects emerged during the workshop, and we combined this with what we called the 3 T's. So we gave the participants some recommendations in paying particular attention to when, so the time where they were posting the content on social media, the text, so how they frame the text also in terms of using hashtags, mentions, and so on, and the type of content. So using a picture instead, for example, of simple text or videos and so on. And these were coming from the analysis that we did, the quantitative analysis that I was mentioning before. So all this material and all the results are available on our website. In this very last minutes, I'm just showing you. So if you go to the website, you can download, for example, the checklist that we produced for science communicators on social media. It's a very simple checklist that is coming from the results of the project, and can be, in our opinion, can be useful, just to have there something that reminds you of the different aspects that you can try to take into account to foster quality in your content when you're communicating on social media. You can also find a presentation on more generally good practices that we identified. We also produced a deck of slides that can be used for training. So this is really meant for having a lecture on these topics, starting also from the digital environment that I was mentioning at the beginning, and that can be used for dissemination. So we really, and if you do, please let us know, because we will be happy to see that this work, is used and exploited also from other people. And we also produced a podcast in the project. The podcast, of course, has different episodes that are focusing on the different topics of the project. There is also a specific episode on social media, where we were focusing on how social media can be helpful to scientists, for example, to communicate their research. The podcast is available on different platforms and also on the website of the project. Very last thing, since maybe you are interested in these topics, I work mainly on, as they introduced me, working on information spreading and social dynamics on online, and we are now working a lot on the topic of the infodemics and in general also how information spreads also in this pandemic in a very in a great team of interdisciplinary researchers from a variety of institutions. So if you want to stay in touch, you can also follow us on different platforms, but also on our website. You will find all the updates on the activity of the IRIS academic research group. I'm done. Hope it's on time, and thank you very much.